We are joined by our special guest, Harry Wilson. He was a former member of President Obama's auto task force and also ran as a Republican for the New York State Comptroller's office and previously worked at a hedge fund partner at Silver Point. So I've been teasing you all morning long as basically somebody who knows a lot about Washington, but also Wall Street. So when you saw this debt deal come through yesterday, what did you think?
Well, you know, it's I think more or less what people expected in the sense that it's more or less a kick the can down the road type plan. It meets the lowest common denominators. Republicans didn't want to have any taxes, and they want to have spending cuts greater than the debt limit increase, and the president wanted something that got us past the election.
So you're disappointed?
Yeah, disappointed ultimately, because at the end of the day, you know, they spent a year trying to come up with $900 billion in cuts. Now they have to come up with $2 billion, $1.5 billion more between now and November.
We kind of missed this opportunity. Is that what it is? Missed the opportunity for the grand bargain, the grand deal, right?
For now, for sure. I think, you know, we'll see what happens in November, you know, with the super committee. That gets us a step closer. It's going to have to, one way or another, either because of automatic spending cuts or because they actually come up with a deal.
Right.
At the end of the day, this was a great opportunity to get a much broader deal, and I think that failed.
Dom's got a question for you.
Yeah, that's right. Harry, it's Dominic here back in the studio. I want to know, people have been talking a lot about this. This is kind of just a nothing deal, so to speak. But how much of it was because a deal had to get done to appease the markets right now? How much of this is not a grand bargain, so to speak, but just a way to put a Band-Aid on it so the markets wouldn't sell off?
Dom, I think it's exactly right. It's a Band-Aid to get past this deadline. I think, you know, this is the first time that default's really been used as a real threat, at least in my lifetime. And it's a shame that it was. It got overly politicized, and at least the adults got back in the room and put that back in a box as it should be. But it also, as a result, they didn't really make the deal that they should have, or I think could have.
Harry, have you talked to some of your friends on Wall Street? I mean, what are they saying to you? What is their reaction to this?
Certainly the reaction I've gotten from most people is very similar to that, which is that, look, they ultimately expected a deal to get done of some kind, and probably the smallest possible deal that could get done. And I think that's kind of what we got. So,
but it's business as usual for them then?
Yeah, I think so. I think people are more concerned about the economic data that's come out recently, particularly the Friday revisions downward on GDP, which have been disastrous.
No. You having been on a bipartisan committee under the president, I mean, what do you think is going to be key for this?
Well, I think, you know, the personalities are going to be so critical, because if you have 12 people who are focused on the long-term problems, I think you can make some progress, but it's going to be hard because you've seen things like the Gang of Six fail, basically, over the last year, and these guys have less time to solve his larger problem. You know, I'm hopeful that if you get the right people in place, they can really address some of the core issues, but you can't really get there without major entitlement reform, and that's going to be the core of whether they're willing to tackle that or not.
Well, I mean, I know this is not exactly apples to apples comparison, but when you were on your committee, because it was, you know, certainly some private officials were on there. How did you overcome sort of partisan differences?
Well, you know, we were lucky in the sense that we were, you know, through TARP, we didn't have to go back to Congress for approval. So once it was already approved, we were able to kind of basically work with the White House and the Treasury to make decisions, and it really smoothed the process dramatically relative to what they have to go through now. And there's such a partisan divide right now in the House and the Senate, particularly the House, that's even harder. When you look at, you know, the kind of growth in spending over the last 10 years, since the last time we had a balanced budget, 65% of it comes from entitlements. So you can't deal with the problem unless you're willing to tackle those. And those are, you know, one side wants to preserve those as an election issue, and the other side wants to tackle them. So it's
what's going to be the difference for you? Because you mentioned that, yes, we've had many budget deficit cutting panels before. I mean, what's going to be the difference for you?
Well, I think the best thing about this deal is that if they don't get to a deal, if the committee doesn't get to a deal big enough to support the debt limit increase, automatic spending cuts cut in. And those cuts are really draconian.
So that threat in the background, basically.
Exactly. I think that's the only thing that gets folks in Washington to act, is the threat of catastrophe.